We need to do a bit more than just giving out pakode and samosa, because after the pakode and samosa, the problems are still going to be there. The background is the genocide in Gaza. Let's talk about Tommy very briefly. Prior to October the 7th, 2023, this guy was a non-entity. No one was platforming him. He was begging to go onto people's podcasts. He started actually praising Muslims. He started bigging up Andrew Tate. No one was listening to him. No one was inviting him on. And lo and behold, within a week of October the 7th happening, his account's been reinstated on X. He's now being invited by all these big podcasters. Entirely a manufactured revival that public opinion has shifted so drastically and radically against Israel. So how do we shift this back? We shift this back by again dehumanizing Islam and Muslims and migrants in general. Last weekend's gathering, the largest gathering by the far right in British history.
Calling for the assassination of the Prime Minister.
Oh yeah, bloody hell. Basically said, look, Salman needs to get. And that's obviously in light of what happened to Charlie Kirk. If any other group were to hold a rally or a march like that, this event would not gone ahead. Many of the speakers would probably have been banned from entering the UK again. But everyone got their doors kicked in from offices. But let's be honest, Salman, and we have to be honest, yeah? Don't start the conversation as you're an Islamophobe, you're a racist, you're far right, you're a Zionist, you're this. They have the same concerns and the same struggles that many of us Muslims who are mainly working class, we actually have more similarities to your average white working class person than, rest assured, than Tommy Robinson does. Tommy Robinson right now, he's flying between Colombia and Panama and he's having lavish holidays in Marbella and all these kind of places. We're struggling out here to make ends meet. But next man, Abdul on the boat, can just come on a dinghy, gets put into a 4-star hotel, and we're struggling out here. I've had those conversations. The fact that the white working class were always cannon fodder for foreign wars and domestic unrest. Why haven't we realized this? The reason why your passion is being channeled towards the wrong people is because they don't want to be held accountable.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Dilly.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Salman, how you doing, broski?
Alhamdulillah. It's been a long time since we were just testing the mics there. So everyone knows what we're talking about here. It's been in the news. It's been on our social media timelines, thanks to Elon Musk as well. All these so-called patriots, taken to the streets of London. I always say you are our ambassador to the far right as a Muslim community. You've interviewed the real ones, not the plastic patriots. Funded and shipped in by Israel or whatever. But we saw over the weekend. People like Ben Habib, who's born in Pakistan, this Gomez lady from the US, this Dutch Colombia, this Dutch guy coming in, this New Zealand guy, Elon Musk, obviously, South African and now an American. So my question to you is, are the real, actual, genuine white nationalists upset all these foreigners are coming over and taking their jobs?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Salman, always an honor to be on, bro. I know this subject matter, as much as there's so much banter around it, and so much memes around it, it is a very serious discussion to be had. I think it's important, first and foremost, for the viewers and listeners to understand that when we talk about British nationalism, or even white nationalism, there's different strands, and there's overlaps and shared ideas, and there's very distinct ideological differences which basically puts them apart and even at loggerheads with one another. So let's start with the most popular type of nationalism, and that's civic nationalism, right? Civic nationalism would include within it the Tories, Reform, Tommy Robinson, GB News, Talk TV, these type of guys. Civic nationalism basically means that they are generally pro-immigration on condition, on condition that those who are migrating to the UK fully assimilate, right? Obviously, Tommy Robinson's a bit different because he's pro-immigration, he's anti-Muslim immigration, but we'll get to Tommy 10 names in a bit. So civic nationalism basically means they look beyond colour and they seek to assimilate newcomers to their country. They are generally pro-Israel. They are generally they're not so focused on religion or culture or heritage. It's more to do with you're welcome to this country so long as you fully assimilate, you don't impose your way of life or values or exercise your religious freedoms, which is claimed to be a British value. So those are the civic nationalists. Reform.
So you would say this is the widest net
The widest net, yes, this is the widest net. But it's important because where we are right now in 2025, in light of the hate march that we saw last weekend, we'll understand that now there is overlaps in ideas where all different strands of nationalists are agreeing on certain points while still disagreeing on other parts. So that's civic nationalists. Then you've got Christian nationalists. So that would include Jada Franson, Nick Griffin, Jim Dawson. These are nationalists who perceive their ideology for the prism of Christendom or Christianity, right? So they wouldn't have an issue with white Christians. Not that I said white Christians, because they'd have a problem with black Christians and non-white Christians, but they have this very Eurocentric, pan-European, pan-Christian mindset. But they also tend to be quite ardently anti-Semitic. There is a genuine dislike, distrust, and hatred for Jews and Judaism, not just Zionists. And that's Christian nationalists. So the likes of Nick Fuentes, who's a very popular American commentator, he would constitute as a Christian nationalist across the pond. The thing about Christian nationalists, however, they have some overlaps with ethno-nationalists. Now, ethno-nationalists are the ones who would be modern-day Nazis, right? They genuinely believe in the supremacy of the white race. They believe in eugenics. They believe in, European colonialism was something of the time. It was beneficial. It was good for the countries that they colonized, and basically they want a homeland for white Brits, and broadly speaking, the white Western world. So let's just quickly go over that again. Civic nationalists are generally pro-immigration on condition that the people who are coming assimilate and tend to be ardently pro-Israel. Christian nationalists have more of a pan-European, pan-white Christian ideology and absolutely despise and distrust Jews. And then the ethno-nationalists who don't care if you're an atheist, don't care if you're a secularist, don't care if you're a Christian. We want a white Britain, a white Europe, and a white Western world. Funnily enough, when I spoke to one of the figureheads of the British white ethno-nationalist movement, which is Mark Collett, the founder of Patriotic Alternative, I asked him, okay, so you don't have a problem with white atheists, white liberals, white Christians. What about white Muslims? He has a problem with white Muslims because he perceives. Oh man, because white ethno-nationalists, they do perceive Islam and Muslims as a civilizational issue. So these are the three types of white nationalism or nationalists, and they exist in the UK. The loudest and the most impactful in terms of traction, obviously, are the civic nationalists at the moment, being led by the paid agitator Tommy Robinson, real name Stephen Yaxley Lennon. Before I hand it back over to you, Salman, there's three overlaps now where all these three groups now agree on, right? Number one, they all agree on this thing called the white replacement theory or the great replacement. What that basically means, in short, is
our secret plan. Basically, they're onto us.
Well, it's not our secret plan. They believe it. Well, there you go. The civic nationalists would say it's a Muslim plan. The ethno-nationalists and the Christian nationalists would say it's a Jewish plan. And basically, this plan is to ethnically displace and replace white Europeans with basically Muslims and people from the developing world and global south as a result of wars created by evil Jews. That's in short the white replacement theory. And you have people like the Kalergi plan and others who've spoken about this. Christian nationalists and ethno-nationalists sign up to this. Civic nationalists are now all of a sudden, they never used to sign up to this, they've now signed up to it. So they're now all saying, look, we are being ethnically displaced. There's a huge demographic shift taking place, whether it's Muslims or African non-Muslims, it doesn't matter. The point is we are being ethnically displaced, all whilst not understanding that one of the reasons why they're being displaced is because of an alarmingly low birth rate and a shockingly high aging population. But we'll get to that. Another thing that they're obviously uniting upon is this loss of cultural identity, right? This loss of Christian heritage. So we're now seeing a resurgence of cultural Christianity. I mean, bloody hell, even Dawkins turned around and said, oh, even though I'm an atheist, I'm a cultural Christian. So now all of a sudden, everyone and their dad and their uncles are now a cultural Christian, yeah? scratch beneath the surface. Plastic Christians don't really believe or practice anything that's from the biblical law or from the Quranic law, anything like that. So ethnic
I mean,
displacement.
there was literally people cursing God on the protest
Of course.
on last weekend. They were saying, who the f is Allah,
Mhm.
and Allah is obviously, even in Arab Christians they use the word Allah as well
Allah.
throughout the Bible in Arabic translations and so forth. So
I mean, look. I mean, last weekend's gathering was a mishmash of all things, and it's important to say from the onset that not every person who attended that is a racist or an Islamophobe or far right. There would have been genuine people there in their thousands that had genuine concerns to do with mass immigration, the loss of their identity, the way white working class people have been, abandoned and sidelined, a whole plethora of socioeconomic issues.
so I wanted to actually get into this
Yeah.
because you guys Five Pillars, and you went through all of those all the lectures, all the talks and stuff, so we don't have to.
Mhm.
So Jazakallah khaira, thank you for bearing that burden for the rest of us. What are their demands then? So where they're upset about, some of them are upset about brown people or Muslims or whatever, but what do they actually want? What are they calling for?
So exactly. So last weekend's gathering, which by the way was the largest gathering by the far right in British history.
Had
Now,
it 3 million.
yeah, forget about no, is it 3 million, 6 million, not one less, not one more. But anyway, definitely wasn't 3 million. Definitely wasn't in the millions. I don't even think it was 500,000. I think it was somewhere between 150 to 200,000, and that's a large and very sizable gathering. Obviously, with the kind of algorithmic amplification on X by Elon Musk and others. So look, the demands vary. We sent Robert Carter there undercover. He's our undercover reporter. He could
Black
nice,
and white there.
yeah. So he goes in there looking a bit rough. Yeah, I said to him, listen, don't get too carried away. I was take a
Paint your
non-alcoholic beer.
face at least, innit?
Yeah, take a non-alcoholic beer and get merry and pretend like just be drinking and say, yeah, bud the muzzies, yeah. So look,
On those handsome devils.
yeah, the demands vary, but I think number one is to do with mass immigration. Is to
Like
do,
on stage demands, right? So there could be random pockets of people here and there shouting whatever, but on stage, like what was the official?
on stage demands is stop Muslim immigrants, stop the bolts, close the borders, and basically free speech. It was marketed as a free speech event. Unite the kingdom, free speech, right? And we saw how they exercise their free speech. We saw the exercising of their free speech by basically calling Muslims rapists, by a Belgian far right guy calling for the end of Islam in Europe and that they are the real enemy, and that when did London become Pakistan? Or Valentina Gomez, a Colombian migrant herself who went into the US via Mexico, is now talking about Muslim rapists. We had some Maori Christians. The irony of Maori Christians in London ripping up the Palestine flag and other flags, calling for not just the end of Islam. The Maori Christians call for the end of Hinduism, Sikhism, any outward expression of any faith besides Christianity. They were calling for it on stage. But if you were to say, right,
Did they say anything about Judaism?
oh no, I didn't hear anything about Judaism. I didn't hear a single thing about Israel or Judaism on stage.
I mean, I saw flags, Israeli flags.
That's a given, though. That's going to be given. That's going to be given. Given Tommy's deep ties, as well as some of the speakers on the stage, the keynote speakers, their deep ties with the Israeli regime, financially, politically, and otherwise. And we can get into that later on as well. There's so much actually to cover today, so let's not rush it. But if you were to say, Dilly, what were the three demands? What were the three on-stage demands from the keynote speakers? It was stop the bolts, close the borders, stop Islam. Stop Islam and the manifestation of Islam in the public space. And number three, for Keir Starmer to basically resign.
Yeah. I asked Grok actually. Tommy Robinson shared the 7 hour whatever long video. I asked Grok, can you summarize the demands? And it wouldn't actually tell me anything, any of the edgy stuff. I had to keep pushing it, saying, okay, did they say anything about Muslims or Islam? I was like, oh yeah, they also said,
Oh, they forgot that bit, yeah.
Forgot that. I was like, why did you forget that? Why did I have to probe you for that? So certainly something's happening there algorithmically. They even called for I think a video I saw you share, or Smile to Jannah did a thing as well, Zishan. They're calling for the assassination of the Prime Minister.
Oh yeah, bloody hell! There was there was a protester there who basically said, "Look, Keir Salman needs to get shot. He needs to get assassinated," and that's obviously in light of what happened to Charlie Kirk. That's
Yeah.
obviously in light of other democratic politicians that were killed in previous years, not so long ago. This is obviously in light
Mm.
of the murder of Joe Cox and the Tory MP, Mr. Innes. I forgot his first name, but he was also killed during one of his booths. And then you had Elon Musk basically calling for violence. You know, violence is coming your way, whether you like it or not. You either fight back or you die.
Yeah.
So that's how they were exercising their free speech. And I'm telling you right now, brothers and sisters, if any other faith group, right, were to hold a rally or a march like that, like we saw last week, and we called Judaism the real enemy of Europe, and that Judaism needs to be ended, or we called for Sikh rapists or Hindu rapists, by Allah, this speech would not go, this event would not gone ahead, and many of the speakers would probably have been banned from entering the UK again. But here we are.
And their neighbors and the
Yeah,
local
everyone.
barber.
Yeah,
Connected to them.
everyone got their doors kicked in from SR15 officers. But you
But the
know
funny
that's
thing is, I was looking at some of these people talking about free speech and they're attacking, the government, and I think something about I think Shabana Mahmood pushing through a definition of Islamophobia, and I asked Grok again. It's like an advertisement of Grok. I asked them, can you look through this person's timeline and see what they've said about prevent or extremism or Islamic, so-called Islamic extremism? The same people that were cheerleading, just handing the government more and more arbitrary powers to shut down people's speech that they didn't like. Now that there's a
oh yeah, of
whiff
course.
of that being
Yep.
implemented on them, now they're crying about free speech and stuff. I'm like, Serb, you're right, man.
So as I would say, it's free speech for I, not for thee. It's one of those
Mm.
situations, bro, because they want the censorship of Islam, they want the censorship of non-Christian religious expression in public, but at the same time, under the same remit, they want to exercise their free speech. And then there is a whole debate, by the way, Salman, to be had internally within the UK, in that where do we draw the line with free speech? We know that there is no such thing as absolute free speech, but we also know that there are incitement laws, there are defamation laws, there are hate speech laws, there are copyright laws. So there is no such thing as absolute free speech. And and I'm sorry, going on a bit of a digress. The reason why many patriots are frustrated by the outward expression of Islam is because Muslims exercise the right to religious freedom just like any other faith group that's protected within the Equalities Act can exercise that right. It is not the fault of the Muslims that we somehow have more of a louder outward expression, or just to simplify it, that we tend to practice our deen more than other faith groups do. That's just a fact. That's a fact beyond any reasonable debate. That Muslims, if you were to compare them to Christians, Sikhs, Hindus, Jews, and any other faith group, we have more of an outward expression and more of our adherents practice their faith. And I've said this repeatedly. I said it recently to a local podcaster who's quite a big name. He's had all the big reform names and so forth, including Tommy Peter McCormack. I said to him, look, the issue here isn't that it's not the Islamization of Western society or British society. It's that Muslims exercise their right to religious freedom more than anyone else. And the reason why they do that is because we tend to have more adherents who actually follow the religion in comparison to others. And he couldn't understand that point. I goes, look, if Hindus wanted to do that, they can do that. If Sikhs wanted to do that, they can do that. Look to Canada. If you look at how Sikhs and Hindus outwardly express and practice their faith in Canada, you see it's very starkly different to the UK. So what the issue here is, as I said to Peter McCormack, is that the issue is to do with, does Britain truly believe in the practice of religious freedom and the tolerance to it? Because if you're telling me that, Sharia councils, Mawlid marches, halal meat, whatever it is, whatever your issue is, rest assured that Muslims are not practicing anything exceptional that other faith communities can't do. So yeah, I mean,
and
look,
if you want to do it as well, you can become Muslim
exactly
and take part in this.
Exactly, bro. So the onstage demands from that painful 7-hour watch was basically close the borders and mass immigration, but more so Muslim immigration. Number two, the Islamization of British society and the West in general. And number three, for Keir Starmer to basically step down because he's basically part of the problem. Those were the three on stage calls. But when Robert and others spoke to the attendees and people who attended the march, we had a plethora of different reasons and so much hypocrisy and double standards and contradictions that it was hard to kind of make out. But yeah, that's that. That was the
I wonder if is anyone putting two and two together that we're talking about free speech here and how and becoming they're performing like victimhood, that we're some victims of some either a white genocide or no one can hear our voices, but pretty much the entirety of the mainstream establishment media has always been pandering to your and feeding your concerns. Immigration's always, it's like a manufactured crisis in people's minds because of the media is always talking about it. It's an easy scapegoat. You got literally the world's biggest, not literally biggest, but the most prolific and richest surveillance capitalist, Elon Musk, who's literally bought and feeding stories to everyone's phones and computers that are in line with your things. Is anyone thinking that, wait a second, maybe we're not the victims of some free speech attack? Maybe we have the loudest voice because of billionaire backers and because of the media establishment and because of certain foreign rogue states that have their own vested interests. Is anyone on the ground, any actual kind of quote unquote patriots, putting two and two together?
The ethno nationalists are. Now the issue with the ethno nationalists is, of course, if they had their way and they came to power, rest assured it'd be a violent expulsion of anyone who's not white. That's obviously the problem with the ethno nationalists, that whether, irrespective of their political analysis, they are neo-Nazis, they are genociders, in that if they were to reach a position of power, they would cleanse their homelands of non-white people. But it tends to be them who are making these points, the like of Steve Laws and the Homeland Party and others. There's a prominent account.
I wonder if we need to beep out any of these names. If it's going to get
well, I'll leave that to you. But generally, if you mention if you mention white genocide or white replacement, YouTube will automatically put a kind of a disclaimer because it's something that's flagged. So do keep that in mind. So the ethno-nationalists are making those arguments. Some Christian nationalists are making those points. Your Nick Griffins, your Jada Fransons, your Jim Dawsons. These guys are making the points. But the sad reality is, actually it's not a sad reality because it's nothing sad for us, but the reality is that constituency of nationalists are not the loudest and most well-funded as, let's say, Tommy and his jolly group of brigadiers who have ties to Israel, who have ties to the Middle East Forum, who have ties to tech giants like Elon Musk, who also may have nefarious links to Russian elements. All of a sudden now Tommy Robinson's talking about Qatar, and he's talking about the Sudanese civil war, and he's talking about Turkey's drone and military projects.
Are people on the ground like getting savvy to this, or do they just kind of brush off as noise and just focus on the stuff that they've been?
The sad reality, bro, and this is sad, is that you're dealing with a constituency of people, white Brits, who for whatever reason are ignorant. Now, whether they are willfully ignorant because they don't want to hear it, or is that they generally don't know the facts on the ground. Now, if you're listening to GB News round the clock, and every time you tune into X, your feed is constantly Tommy Robinson and Elon Musk and prominent, kind of right-wing, Islamophobic, anti-immigration accounts, and that's what you're being fed, and you have been fed, you're naturally going to inform your positions and your views based on that. When Robert engaged with some of the people, they were really, really, really unintelligent, and they were really, really, really not.
You just choose the thickest ones to.
Well, I did ask Robert and others who we sent on the ground to try to speak to people who seemed a bit grounded, but people were just, look, if you have a genuine concern, which many do, that look, we live in this quiet part of an English town, and all of a sudden now there's a hotel there that has strange men. When they say strange men, they're basically saying foreign men, non-white immigrants that are now in these hotels, and they're kind of loitering around, and we feel threatened by it. Now, let's put aside, how we got there in this perceived threat. The point is, let's be honest, Salman, and we have to be honest, yeah? One incident is enough for people to be threatened. One incident, even as a father to daughters, right? And you're a father as well. If we heard that the hotel down the road, there was an immigrant or a migrant who raped or sexually abused or violently attacked a local, it just takes one incident, right, for that threat and concern to be genuine, right? They need to articulate that, but what they're not articulating is basically stop the borders, kick them out. They're all rapists. Their prophet did X, Y, and Z, not knowing that many of them are Eritreans and Christians and Christian Africans that are coming over. Like I said, it's a very dumbed down, nonsensical argument. By all means, convey your concerns about immigration. By all means, convey your concerns about having safer borders. By all means, talk about how there isn't a cultural synergy between the people who are coming over and what they regard to be British culture. But we're just not having those conversations. We've not even got to the conversation where, why do we have immigration of this nature? Why is it like this? Why is it? And I gave these notes to Robert, and Robert was like, I can't even get past the first point because we're just not there as a conversation. So when we hear about fighting age men coming over in boats, well, what demographic of people did you think were going to make that perilous journey to cross the waters to get to where you are? The poor, the elderly, the disabled, the mothers with many children, they can't make that journey. Of course, it's going to be the able-bodied men who are going to make that journey. No one's talking about wars. No one's talking about the fact that we saw a huge Albanian migration straight after the Kosovo and Albania war with Serbia. No one spoke about the high levels of Afghan immigration post the invasion of Afghanistan. No one spoke about the high levels of Kurdish immigration straight after the invasion of Iraq. No one's talking about what happens when you destabilize entire regions. No one talks about what happens when you apply sanctions or support regimes that kill their own people. Right? So we're not even there yet. No one talks about the fact that every time a migrant lands in the UK, their biometrics are taken, they're processed, their names and details are put into and compared against a global database, so like Interpol and Europol and so forth, and that they have a automatic recognition card, an ARC, or that they get £49 a week or £7 a week, depending on whether how much food they're eating. No one talks about the fact that if we look at the small boat migrants, let's look at the top 5 countries: Afghanistan, Eritrea, Iran, Syria, Sudan. Let's put Eritrea aside, which is a Christian country, and I don't know much about their geopolitics, but what does Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, and Sudan have in common? War, invasion, sanctions, all of which Britain has a direct hand to play with. Now, if we look at legal migration, let's look at legal migration. Oh, that's another issue now. So a lot of people are now saying, no, it's not just the illegal immigration, it's the legal migration, which is the bigger problem. Okay, so let's look at the countries. India, number 1, Nigeria, number 2, Pakistan, number 3, China, number 4, Zimbabwe, number 5. What did Brexiteers think was going to happen after they left the European Union? That's why we saw interviews back in 2016. Why are you voting for Brexit? Because we want Turks and Muslims out of the country. Well, we're literally talking about European migration here. So naturally, as a result of the Boris wave which took place just before COVID, of course you were going to see more applicants from the Commonwealth. What did you think was going to happen? No one's having these conversations, Salman. No one's having the conversation about fiscal policies that are based on taxation. And that when you have an aging population, and as crude and crass as this sounds, people who are elderly, obviously the Islamic paradigm is completely different. We see our elderly and our parents as something we have to look after. It's a responsibility not just of the state, but of the society and the family as well. Whereas sadly, capitalist societies see elderly as a strain on their economy because they rely heavily on public services, and they're not giving back in terms of taxes, and they need to be given pension. Then you have a young population that's not having kids. The white British birth rate is 1.1. To have a stable population, you need a birth rate of 2.1. No one's having these conversations. No one's talking about the shadow economy that capitalists, benefit from in their billions. That all the cash in hand stuff. The state is like a casino. The state is like a casino. The house always wins. There is a economic, fiscal benefit in why we're seeing the levels of immigration that we are seeing. Now, Christian nationalists, ethno nationalists would say, this is it. This is the Jewish plan. This is the Kalergi plan. This is basically evil plotting Jews who basically lead Western countries, Christian countries, to war in the Muslim world, create a huge immigration crisis to then bring them into Europe and ethnically displace us. That's what they would argue. Now, civic nationalists are a bit more arrogant than that. They're a bit more arrogant in the sense that they don't even acknowledge war, destabilization, sanctions as a direct contributing factor to the levels of immigration that we're seeing. And one last thing before I hand it back over to you, bro, because once you get me started on this topic, bro, I'm just going to carry on. No one talks about, why don't they go to Muslim countries then? Why don't they? Well, yes, the vast majority of refugees are taken in by neighboring Muslim countries. For example, the Rohingya and Bangladesh. For example, Afghanistan and Pakistan. For example, Syria and Turkey. Syria and Lebanon. Syria and Jordan. For example, the Palestinians and the breadth of the Arab world. So don't give us this nonsense. Don't give us this nonsense that Muslim countries don't take in refugees and migrants. They are the largest recipients, disproportionately, incomparatively, taking the most refugees and migrants because the wars and the destabilization, everything's happening in that neck of the woods.
Jazakallah khair. Yeah, I mean, all the stuff you're saying is correct and it's logical and it makes sense. But the problem is this debate doesn't seem to be characterized by logic or
it's not
facts.
It's not.
And there seems to be certain interests that are pushing large amounts of people in that direction of forget the logic or here's a new set of alternative facts.
Do you know why that is?
Do
you know why that is, bro? It's because in the last 2 years, in the last 23 months of a live stream genocide in 4K, public opinion in the West has pivoted so drastically against Israel on the side of Palestinians that the powers that be, the Israeli lobby, the warmongering neocons, and even the neoliberal establishments, they thought, how are we going to shift this around? Like, this is historic. We can give or take maybe the Gen Z, the Gen Alpha, maybe. But now you got boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, white Europeans, white Brits, white Americans who now have a significant and overwhelming position and opinions against Israel. These are going to be tomorrow's voters, Salman. These are going to be people who will be voting in parties, meaning depending on what political party and what they have included in their manifesto pledges, especially related to the Middle East and Israel, they will not be voting these people into power. That's what whilst I'm not subscribing or endorsing them, your Tucker Carlsons, your Candace Owens, your huge, significant, big following American pundits, as well as those in Europe, in Britain as well. How do we shift this? How do we turn this back around? Oh, we know. Let's just revert back to what we've always done, and that's to redirect the hate against Muslims and migrants. We saw this post 9/11. We saw this post 7/7. We've seen this whenever there is huge pressure on Israel, and there is huge pressure on Israel. Make no mistake that the vast majority of the global community now sees it as a pariah rogue state, that the vast majority of humanity now either side with the Palestinians or at the very least they sit on the fence with a healthy level of skepticism towards Israel. So given that this is happening, how do they turn this around? Well, we know. Let's revive this 9/11 war on terror narrative that Islam and Muslims are the threat, the existential threat, the civilizational threat, the very everyday threat at your doorsteps in these hotels. And who better than the paid agitator, Tommy Robinson, who already has deep ties and links to Israel and the Likud party, the Middle East Forum, someone who has visited Israel, proudly dons the IDF t-shirt. English Defence League, before it registered as the English Defence League, was registered as the Jewish Defence League. I encourage everyone to see this fantastic explainer video by our brother Low-Key Kareem for Double Down News, who done a fantastic explainer on Tommy Robinson's link to Israel and the Zionist lobby. And also, let's talk about Tommy very briefly. Prior to October the 7th, 2023, this guy was a non-entity. No one was platforming him. He was begging to go onto people's podcasts. He started actually praising Muslims for their stance against LGBT education. He started bigging up Andrew Tate. No one was listening to him. No one was inviting him on. And lo and behold, within a week of October the 7th happening, his account's been reinstated on X. He's now being invited by all these big podcasters. So it was entirely a manufactured, revival.
It's like a convergence of different groups and their shared interests, because someone could see what you're saying as some kind of big Jewish conspiracy, and the fact is the Zionists are actually playing with fire, right? Because they must know that if we stoke this, some of these guys are actually genuinely anti-Semitic, right? And there's going to be some spillover, there's going to be some collateral damage. It's almost as though for the short-term win, or just almost as though Israel is saying, I'm going to drag you down with me. You're going to throw this grenade into British society, American society, foment all this chaos. But some of them, as a result, it's going to lead to actual genuine anti-Semitism, because some of these people are, like you said, they're genuine, ethno-nationalists.
Yeah, I mean, think of it like this. Yeah, under the American Constitution, an American citizen has an inalienable right not to just criticize their own government, but call for its violent overthrowing. That's protected within the American Constitution. Yet the Trump administration, via the ICE, is deporting people for airing opinions against Israel. What do you think is going to happen in American society with that? What do you think is going to happen with this one rule for Israel and another rule for everyone else, including American citizens, criticizing American foreign policy? I mean, I want viewers and listeners just to put that into perspective. An American citizen, by law, is protected to call for the violent overthrowing of their own government. But people are being deported back to wherever countries they're coming from for criticizing Israel. So, as you rightly said, Israeli lobby can carry on doing what they're doing. And let's also make a distinction here. We are not subscribing to the Kalergi plan, the white replacement theory, that there's evil Jews that are planning this to plot a civilizational war between Christendom and the Muslim world to keep us in a perpetual state of war so they can do what they need to do. We don't subscribe to this crass and crude interpretation of events. Muslims are not so nihilist like this. Alhamdulillah, we give ultimate agency and infinite agency to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what we will say is this, that even the Raise the Colors campaign, Raise Our Flag campaign, it was in direct response to the fact that the Palestine flag had become so mainstream, was being waved and raised everywhere. And remember this, that the biggest concern is not brown Muslims supporting Palestine. It's the white non-Muslims that are supporting Palestine, that are waving the flag and raising the flag, and that these are going to be tomorrow's voters. These are going to be
grannies getting arrested.
It's the grannies getting arrested for Palestine action, stand against genocide. How do we change the wave and the tide? Well, guess what? You can't. This is the normal, fitri human reaction to people seeing a genocide in 4K. That there's no more lying, no more hasbara tactics, no more propaganda in humanizing Israel as the kind of defenseless victim of a region which is hell bent to see its demise is no longer the case. Israel, just in the space of 3 months, has bombed 7 Muslim majority countries, right? They're doing everything, they're filming everything. In English, they'll say one thing, in their Hebrew media, they'll say another thing. In addition to this, you've got your IDF soldiers filming and documenting all of this. You can't hide this. So given that is the backlog, that is the background context. And by the way, GB News, Talk TV, Tommy Robinson, the civic nationalists, remember what I said at the beginning of this podcast, they are ardently pro-Israel. Unlike the Christian nationalists and the ethno-nationalists, the civic nationalists are basically like the American neocons and the American Republicans, right? And they make no mistake. They make who's that Shrek-looking Janani? Julia something.
Julia Hartley-Brewer.
Julia Hartley-Brewer. Yeah, can you imagine, bruv? Yeah,
I always thought she reminds me of someone, man.
Yeah, like she's there day in, day out, justifying the killing, the murder, the decimation of women and children, and she's still there blaming Palestine, Arabs, Muslims, Hamas, anything. We've had the International Association of Genocide Scholars who have said it's a genocide. We had the UN inquiry, which has concluded that it was a genocide. We have the ICJ case, which said there was a plausible genocide. We've had so many non-Muslim, mainstream, international human rights groups and international organizations and bodies have concluded it's a genocide. Yet we have the likes of Tommy Robinson, GB News, Nigel Farage, Reform, Talk TV, your civic nationalists, who are and even Kemi Badenoch and everyone else, and even the Tories here who are now so confused that they don't know whether to pander to the far right to save themselves from losing MPs to Reform, or to pander to a more of a centrist position because they're losing MPs to the Liberal Democrats. What we're going to see in the next general election, Salman, in the UK, is potentially the end of the two uni-party system, especially in the rise of the Green Party under Zach Polanski and Brother Motin Ali. Obviously, the madness that's happening with your party, we don't know what's going to happen with that. But we're literally seeing people, your party, our party, Mera, Tera, Tora, whatever party, yeah. But we're going to see some serious changes in the next general election. And by the way, I don't think it's going to happen in 2029. I could potentially see this happening in 2 years. So look, just to wrap up on this point, the background context is the genocide in Gaza. That public opinion has shifted so significantly, so drastically and radically against Israel, that this is something that they did not envisage. So how do we shift this back? We shift this back by, again, dehumanizing Islam and Muslims, by criminalizing certain beliefs and migrants in general, by painting them all as rapists and violent, violent terrorists and things like this. The raise our flags was in direct response to the raising and the mainstream of the Palestine flag. So there's all these things happening, and quite frankly, it is a positive sign in that when an oppressive civilization or state or polity is nearing its end, it throws everything out of the pram, and you will see it at its most violent and unhinged state towards its end. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's what we're witnessing.
I mean. So I was taking some notes down, like who's to blame, whose fault is it, who created this kind of new kind of movement? Because there's a shift, right? When a moment becomes a movement, okay, of these coalescing kind of angry young, a lot of them are men, kind of with the messaging that we saw on stage over the weekend. So one clear kind of hand in it is Israel and Zionists and so forth, both foreign and domestic kind of Zionists. One is the media outlets for years were, pushing these narratives. We have the loss-making GB News you mentioned. You have Rupert Murdoch. You have the billionaires that tend to be right wing anyway, and now you have the super rich kind of Elon Musk chiming in with the same kind of thing basically, but on people's phones instead of their TVs now. Kind of every time I open up X now, it's just the first multiple things are his things that he shared or whatever. So it's and then you have the super rich who are actually, by pretty much, like, objectively, they're the ones that are responsible for why these people's lives are rubbish, right? Because all the stuff you said about, okay, imagine if there's you're in a little village and a bunch of foreigners come, we have that empathy with people. But the fact of the matter is, you are more likely to be prejudiced against racial minorities if you don't live with them. Okay, this is like an established, there are certain exceptions, but there's an established trend, right? That the more you come into contact with other people from other backgrounds, the less kind of racist you generally are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why. How do these people know about? How does someone in in a village in the middle of nowhere who's never seen a brown person in his life, how do they feel? Why do they think immigration is such a big problem? Rape gangs and fighting age men and so forth, because of the things certain interests have been telling them, right? And those people, those interests that happen to be profiting off their labor, profiting off wiping up all of the assets in the country, both from the working classes and then the middle class and the government assets, state-owned assets and so forth, because that's what extreme wealth inequality has done, right? It's made the poor
Poorer,
much poorer
and the
and the rich
rich,
much
richer.
richer.
Yep.
And if the rich have so much disposable income, if you're gonna have like millions of pounds, a month to just blow on anything, there's only so much you can spend, right? And then what do you do with the rest of it? You just acquire more assets, and that raises the prices up. And then the average, builder or plumber, whatever, he's like, "Well, my dad could afford a house on one income, and why can't I afford a house?" and so forth. Now there's some people telling them, okay, the reason why is all these immigrants are coming over here. The reason why is all these, if they're ethno-nationalist Jews, or if they're, civic nationalists, they'll talk about blame the lefties or whatever. So there's that. Definitely that kind of interest as well, and it kind of coalesces, right? Because they tend to be owners of, the media, right? Rich. I think something like 80% of our newspapers in the UK are owned by individual billionaires,
A handful.
like a handful of billionaires, right? So they're going to be churning out messaging that takes people's attention away from them and say blame someone else, that whole scapegoat kind of thing. And then there's also like people like Keir Starmer, right, who's been pandering to this thing as well.
Pathetic.
And I've been thinking, I thought, everyone has a reaction. It's like, oh, what a waste man. He's just showing no spine. He's just like an empty vessel, just saying whatever will get some attention. But I thought maybe he's playing a game that, Tommy Robinson's rise actually helps him, because it's going to split up, or take people away from Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, who's the biggest kind of threat to Labour right now, isn't it? So part of me thinking, yeah, they are calling for my assassination.
Yeah.
They're so crazy that no one's seriously is gonna believe them, but they're kind of bleeding
No, bro.
blocks away from.
I mean, that's a very optimistic Hussain done for Keir Starmer. I mean, the Overton window has shifted so far on the right that what was seen as far right, nonsensical, dangerous talking points has become normalized now. The conversation about mass deportations, remigration, banning Islam, and bringing the navy in to shoot down migrants on dinghies. These things, these conversation points are now very, very mainstream, to the extent where Donald Trump mentioned it to Keir Starmer, because bringing the army. This was something that would have been nonchalantly, dismissed by previous administrations. Just on that point, the reason why Keir Starmer can't bank on Tommy Robinson splitting the Reform vote, because Reform has already acknowledged internally, even though they've not publicly said this, but many of their councillors and many of their activists have basically said it online, that the vast majority of Tommy Robinson's supporters would have voted for Reform, but now they're going to probably vote for Advance. Advance has the financial backing of Elon Musk, and will probably have the algorithmic backing of Elon Musk. But just to answer your question, bruv, who is behind all of this? Well, it's all the people and entities that you've mentioned. But there's a broader ideological reality which we need to understand, which is capitalist states and capitalists generally, it's profits over values. It's who makes them the maximum profits with the least amount of cost. They couldn't give a rat's if it's black, white, brown, Muslim, yellow, non-Muslim. They don't care. And I've said this repeatedly to those who lean towards the right, that the white working class have always been cannon fodder for the ruling elite. Even at the peak and the zenith of British Empire, they were sending your kids down chimneys. That was the whole point of Charles Dickens' books on the writings and the orphanages and Oliver Twist and all of that. It was all to do with the fact that the white working class were always cannon fodder for foreign wars and domestic unrest. Why haven't we realized this? Why haven't
Not only that, they champion and they make heroes out of the people responsible for that.
Exactly.
Like Margaret Thatcher, for example, crushed the unions. Like the union is and you're complaining about your wages being poor now, and you hold posters of Margaret Thatcher like she's some kind of hero. Deindustrialization, moving our industry from the UK, going to cheaper places. This is hallmark neoliberalist capitalism.
Straight up.
And economics. But there are people who that's what I'm saying. There's people who are making the people who are responsible for your lives being rubbish, turning them into heroes in your mind, giving you this messages and distracting you away from this
And Nigel Farage is no different. He is part of the billionaires boys club.
Yeah, I mean,
He
he's a city trader.
exactly straight up. So
Yeah.
and I don't understand why your average working class white Brit always resorts and is duped by this all the time. So yeah, I mean, look, capitalist nations and capitalist corporations and they care about profits with the least amount of costs for them, and naturally they benefit from war. They benefit from war from basically, when you talk about smashing the gangs and smashing human traffickers, they benefit from that. They benefit from the cheap labor.
How do
And
they benefit from that?
benefit from what?
From gangs and
Because these gangs would no doubt be in some level of communication with people within governments or elements or agents as part of the government to ensure that certain safe passages are given. Let's be brutally honest. We had 2 years of COVID. We saw what lockdown looks like. If they really want to close the borders, they can close the borders. If they really want to close the borders, they can close the borders. They locked the entire world down for 2 years. They can close the borders if they wish. Now, when you have cheap labor and you're basically undercutting the indigenous people of a land because they have certain expectations for salaries, by you, we're gonna take the Indian Uber driver and the Just Eat guy. We will take the telesales, and the call center person who's going to take a third less than what you're even expecting. They're going to benefit from this type of immigration. They're going to benefit from undercutting the indigenous locals, because they know that these people coming from the developing world have different financial expectations and they will work for much less. They benefit from this. The governments benefit from taxing them. The government benefits from taxing them, because it goes back to the point I made at the beginning. Unless you address the alarmingly low birth rate, not just in Britain, but across the Western world. And by the way, a drop in birth rate is happening all around the world, including the Muslim world. No country, I think, bar Niger, which has a birth rate of 7, mashallah.
I think Nigeria and India only have
Niger.
Nigeria as well?
No, Niger has 7. Niger's birth rate is 7, which is like
7.
Yeah.
Wow. So, I think it might be skewed because it's a very small country, isn't it?
Yeah, but sorry, Niger birth rate. 2 seconds. 6. Niger's birth rate is 6, but it's very
Nigeria.
Nigeria birth
rate. Nigeria.
Nigeria birth rate.
Above 2.1 per woman.
4. You need 2.1. So Nigeria is 4.48, which is very healthy.
I think,
Pakistan.
Also check India.
Pakistan is 3.6, very healthy. Bangladesh birth rate 2. Look at that, bro. For Bangladesh, that's low, bro. That's 2.1. Bangladesh is currently 2.1.
The problem is just a 10% drop in birth rate doesn't mean a 10% drop in the population. It has outside effects,
of
like
course.
exponential.
But the point of
especially like 2 generations down the line.
For a stable country, for a stable polity, for a stable indigenous population, you need a birth rate of at least 2.1. Yeah, Britain is currently 1.41. If you take away the non-white birth rate, it's somewhere between 1 to 1.1. You have an aging population. 97.5% of all elderly in care homes in the UK are white. If you don't address this, then what's going to happen is that those who are making economic and fiscal policies are going to say, well, we have no choice. I mean, they would argue, we have no choice. Who do we tax? Who do we get this extra income from? How do we bump up the birth rate? Now, the white ethno-nationalists would basically say, we don't care. Get them out and we'll talk about it once everyone's gone. Once we've had remigration at the level that we want to see, then we can talk about our problems. But the truth of the matter is, if you were to take non-white migrants, let's say you were to press a button, boop, and in 1 month, everyone's gone. The economy collapses. The economy collapses. You will have, forget about inflation, you'll have a Great Depression here, right? You take Muslims out of the British economy, from your hospitality to your transportation to restauranting, everything.
I was saying that back in the day with Brexit arguments. So I said all the brown people just leave, then the racists will die and then come back 6 months later.
I would love. I know this is a very lofty aspiration, and I've proposed this to a few people within our community. I said, look, maybe a time has come where we have a 2-day national strike. And so they realize what Britain would look like when every single Muslim or every single non-white migrant or someone of immigrant descent decides not to go to work. Let's see how that looks like. Let's see how you handle it for 2 days. We see how
that's a good idea, man.
but the sad reality is how you're going to convince people to do that. But I genuinely believe that if Muslims or non-white migrants or people of immigrant descent were to just say,
probably illegal though, I think, because our laws, thanks to Thatcher and co, that we're not allowed to do sympathy, what they call sympathy strikes and stuff, and solidarity with other sectors and stuff like that. Even striking is got so much red tape and bureaucracy around it now, hence the kind of crushing of the unions and so forth. But I mean, I'm always careful and hesitant to take things down an economic kind of determinism route, because there's always like left wing and right wing, and we kind of end up wandering into politics of Marxist versus capitalist, whatever. It's hard to deny that probably the majority lion's share of the blame when it comes to the real life problems, not the fake propaganda problems like immigration or whatever, the real life problems, why people's lives are rubbish. I think the lion's share of the blame goes to the economics behind it, right? People being squeezed out of ownership of stuff, and just going back to, economists say that what we've experienced post-war is like a blip in human history. Most of the period in this country, especially, for example, is a tiny number of people owning everything and everyone just being serfs and sending them down chimneys or whatever. Like just people having a middle class, having ownership of certain people, having ownership of stuff, is abnormal, and it seems to be returning to that kind of direction. So I guess one question is, what is our job? Because we've spoken about who they are, who created them, what are their demands, what are the real life issues that fomented the problems that make people want to go towards those groups and those ideologies and scapegoat immigrants and refugees or whatever. As Muslims, though, we have a different story. We have a different history. Coming over here, taking their jobs, coming over here, and surely we should have something to say when it comes to how do we fix this problem. Have you given some thought to that? I mean, there is obviously an issue of fixing the problems overseas, but in terms of, because sometimes I worry, have we done our job when it comes to why Dave down the street, why his life is rubbish, why he's so miserable, why he's being squeezed out of the system, he's being oppressed and so forth. Maybe Allah will ask me about the random non-Muslim or white folks here. They are being oppressed by their own elites. Yeah, they are being treated like cannon fodder. But what's our job? What's our haqq towards them?
Jazakallah khair for that, bro. I think that's a good point to kind of bring some kind of balance from an Islamic perspective in terms of our duty to our qawm. Let's be honest about it. Whether they see us as their qawm or not, they are our qawm. They might not be our ummah, but they're our qawm. That's how I see it. And we're not our people, because ultimately, when you get out your day-to-day lives, it's your white Brit that is your qawm. And we've known from the stories of the previous prophets, they weren't always liked by their qawm, right? So we have a huge responsibility towards them. And before I begin on addressing this part, the most important thing is to understand that they are human beings. They want to live, survive, have a stomach full of food, feel safety and law and order, be able to send their children to school and not feel threatened, real or not, perceived or not, of being raped or being groomed or being attacked, or feel like whatever they stand for and represent is being taken away, is withering away. So we have to accept whether it's some or many of their grievances are genuine. Remember, notice I've said genuine and not legitimate. Legitimate means the objective truthness behind their concerns, right? So if someone has a concern about mass immigration and they'll say X, Y, and Z, that concern is genuine. because you can see that it's had an impact on the way they are. Whether it's an accurate representation of the reality, that's something completely different, and that is where they basically get brainwashed and taken down a path of hatred and actually away from where their energy should be harnessed towards. So the first thing as Muslims we need to do is to understand that those who are parroting these narratives, those who attended last weekend's march, those who are putting flags up in their windows and their roads, are not all racists, are not all Islamophobes. And even if they have those stereotypes or beliefs like that, know that that opinion of theirs has not been informed through a rational kind of understanding of all the different variables at hand. They haven't even understood the most basic reality of how we got to where we are. If they can't even make a link between war, destabilization, Iraq, Afghanistan, Brexit, we're not even there yet. So deal with them as human beings. They have rights over you. Deal with them as human beings. Don't start the conversation as you're an Islamophobe, you're a racist, you're far right, you're a Zionist, you're this. If they're interested in discourse, have a genuine discourse and understand that they are a parent, they are someone's brother, sister, mother, and they have the same concerns and the same struggles that many of us Muslims who are mainly working class, who mainly are also socioeconomically struggling with wealth disparity, we actually have more similarities to your average white working class person than, rest assured, than Tommy Robinson does. Tommy Robinson's right now, he's flying between Colombia and Panama, getting kicked out of there, and he's having lavish holidays in Marbella and all these kind of places, yeah? Nigel Farage is, his girlfriend's buying like very £1 million properties in Clacton and wherever, all these places. They don't have any kind of affinity with the white working class, except that they are white, yeah? So we need to begin there. These are human beings. These are our neighbours. These are our qawm. They have rights over us, and we have a duty over them. The thing is, Salman, I'm not making excuses, but it has been an uphill battle since the war on terror, since 7/7, since Woolwich, since the dawn of ISIS, since all of that stuff. You know, the 14 years of austerity and the Tory policies, everything happening abroad and at home. So we've been battling against all these lies in an uphill battle. What I would say as Muslims is you need to now start making time for your white friends, your white neighbours, your white colleagues, your white peers. That doesn't mean going to town centre and putting a dawah stall there. I said to a few brothers, yeah, Ikhwan, like, Ikhwani, this, I'm not talking about just going there and just putting a dawah stall there, which could actually exacerbate and worsen the situation in some context, right? But go and engage. Just go check for your neighbour, go check for your friend, go check for an old school friend that you may not have connected with. Find out what if you know someone who's not had a flag outside their house, but all of a sudden they've got a flag now. Go link them, go check for them, find out what's happening. You know, is there anything that I can help you with, or like, you know, can I help, address some of these issues or concerns that you have towards migrants or Muslims? Talk to me. Make yourself accessible. Make yourself available. And with all due respect, we need to do a bit more than an annual open day mosque, an open day at the mosque. We need to do a bit more than just giving out pakode and samosa, because after the pakode and samosa, the problems are still going to be there. They're still going to go on to X and tune into GB News. And as much as we'd like to think that our cuisine and our food and our generosity in giving that food softens people's hearts, it may do, but the time has now come where we need to have meaningful discussions and making our masajid a place that is accessible to them within reason, obviously with security measures taking place given the current climate. But there needs to be a far more creative outreach programs from Muslim communities and our faith leaders to be doing it on a national level, on a community level in terms of regionally, town by town, whether it's Slough, whether it's Bedford, whether it's Luton, whether it's the North, whether it's the Midlands, and on an individual level, reaching out to as many white non-Muslim friends that you have, or you had, or you may have been in touch with. I've been doing that recently. I've been reaching out to friends that I went to school with, people that I went to university with, people that I worked with at the local newspaper, reaching out to them. Yeah, what's happening? How you doing? What's going on? You know, and some of them have.
Go for a beer.
Not that. Let's go for a kebab. But I've linked some of them. Some of them understand that, oh, this is just BS, and like we're not going to subscribe to any of this. We're not racist. We're not Tom Robinson supporters, and that's maybe because they naturally lean towards the left. But I have had other friends that say, look, bro, let's be honest about it. All we're seeing is like migrants in hotels getting iPhones and getting meals and being looked after, and we're struggling out here with bills. We're struggling out here to make ends meet. We have to jump through how many hoops if we lose our passport or if we want to bring our spouse over. But next man, Abdul on the boat can just come on a dinghy, gets put into a 4-star hotel, and is given X, Y, and Z, and we're struggling out here. I've had those conversations. I've had the conversations where, why do you people care so much about Palestine and not your own country? You have to dispel these lies and these myths. It's not that people love Palestine more than Britain. It's that people are standing on the right side of history, on the side of those who are being genocided. And there is a legal obligation of the British government as a signatory of, I think it was the Anti-Genocide Convention, that they have a duty to actually intervene and stop the genocide. That's what it is. So we have to open ourselves up to have these conversations. We have to be open to our positions being critiqued. Now, if you don't know as a Muslim why you believe a certain thing, or why you attended a particular march, or why you're waving a particular flag, then I advise you to start understanding why we hold the positions that we do, because you can't defend a position or articulate a position if you don't know why you believe it in the first place. So the first thing that Muslims need to do is to reach out. And I'm not talking about these kind of shallow, optical reaching out for photo campaigns. I'm talking about meaningful connections. Right? If that opportunity is there, reach out to friends and family. If you're a revert or a convert, reach out to your family members, old school friends, old university friends. Be creative in engaging the wider community via your masajid or via your local dawah organizations. Don't just think that giving out a copy of the Quran and having a dawah from the middle of town center is the answer. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, may Allah bless the brothers who do this and will continue to do this, and it's needed. Ameen. But there just needs to be a bit more creative kind of like engagement. We just need to have honest and frank conversations now. And that also includes, Salman, acknowledging some faults that we may have within our own communities. Yeah? I'm not talking about the Muslim beg level that we Muslim, we love you to bits. We love you to bits. You know that. But the type of conversation that we were having in South Africa during our travels, I'm not talking about that level, right? Because I'm telling you now, if the streets of Spark Hill or Berry Park were clean and spotless with lovely flowers, I don't think that's going to address the problem. It may help with some perceptions, but then you'll have to then deal with, the reason why these Muslim areas look so nice is because they're getting government funding and we're not. It's no point, yeah? Have meaningful conversations. If they're talking about grooming, let's talk about grooming. If they're talking about predatory behavior amongst some Muslim men that were born here, second, third gen, let's have that conversation. But let's try have that conversation based on data. Let's have that conversation based on what's available and what's not available in terms of statistics and crime data, so we don't make problematic conclusions. Empathize with them, humanize with them. Because, look, I'm not saying in the slightest that's any kind of conclusive, conclusions with regards to the grooming matter. What I'm saying is that the way in which it has been conveyed to the masses is that there are predatory groups of Muslim men, predominantly Pakistani, but Muslim men who target white vulnerable girls, right? This has happened. It has happened in multiple towns and cities. Does that mean, therefore, most Muslim or Pakistani men are sexual groomers and predators? Absolutely not. Is it fair to draw such conclusions? Absolutely not. Why? Let's look at the data. Let's look at why these men did what they did. And let's see if this transcends communities or if it's something specific. Let's see if any of these men cited religion as a justification, or if they cited the Prophet's marriage to Aisha or something. None of them did. So let's have this conversation. So I think it's time now to just put aside pleasantries, putting aside, walking on eggshells, and let's just have a frank conversation. What do you want to talk about? Immigration, Islamization of Western societies and institutions, the outward expression of Muslims, grooming gangs. What do you want to talk about? Sharia councils, halal meat? Let's have that conversation. How many patriots know that if halal meat was banned tomorrow, the only reason it would be banned is because the non-stunned meat would be banned. Yeah? And 80 to 85% of all meat consumed by Muslims in this country are stunned. Guess who's going to be impacted straight away and immediately? The Jews will. Because all of kosher meat is non-stunned. Patriots won't know this. Patriots won't know that whilst there's 85 or 87 Sharia councils, there's dozens of Jewish councils and Sikh councils and Hindu councils who deal with things like family mediation, marital mediation, beef between community members and stuff like this. Stuff which the UK English common law allows. It allows respective faith communities to arbitrate on these issues within their faith-based councils. How many patriots know that? Do you understand? And if the argument's going to be, there should be no religious councils, then let's have a conversation about whether Britain really is a secular society which claims to champion religious freedom. We've known that it's been a hypocrisy from day dot. But do they know that? So these are the type of conversations we need to start having. Don't be scared. Don't be under pressure to discuss these things. Of course.
So that's on a human level to the individuals out in the streets in your community, your neighbours, and so forth.
Across the country, but obviously masajid, Muslim organisations,
institutionally as well.
Exactly, it has to be done institutionally now. Remember, we used to have Visit a Mosque Day once a year. It was organised by MCB. Mashallah, tabarakallah, fantastic initiative.
Still do that,
that needs to be not an annual thing now. That needs to be maybe a weekly thing, a monthly thing. At the very minimum, a quarterly thing. If you want to talk about masajid, who we can look towards as Lewisham Islamic Centre. Lewisham Islamic Centre, the outreach programs and the dawah efforts that Imam Shakil Beg, Imam Ashraf and these guys are doing, that is a beacon mosque in terms of meaning dealing with the difficult conversations, opening their doors to the white locals and letting them ask whatever they want. Yeah? And the number of converts and reverts that the masjid is getting as a result of these outreach efforts, even though our outreach efforts isn't just to convert, but it's to just engage. They talk about community cohesion. Let's actually now work towards community cohesion, because burying our heads in the sand, brothers and sisters, wallahi, is going to cause a bigger problem. One alim from Birmingham, he messaged me when I sent a broadcast message out. And he said, is this just fear-mongering? I goes, fear-mongering? Okay. I went to Spark Hill for the FOSIS annual conference a couple of weeks ago, and it was held in Spark Hill. Just as you enter Spark Hill, right outside, there's flags everywhere. I'm like, you still want to pretend that there's not an issue here? Let's be serious now, because if our sisters are now being increasingly filmed and harassed in public, right? Situation is getting bad, and there is a real chance of an actual far-right government coming into power in the next 2 to 4 years. So I'm not fear-mongering. I'm being genuinely serious that there needs to be a meaningful effort institutionally, regionally, communally, and individually in terms of reaching out and engaging with your non-Muslim neighbours, peers, friends, and community people, especially those who are white. Now, in terms of the flip side, what do we do from a accountability, governmental point of view, is that we continue highlighting that it was this problem that people are now, worried about, whether it's immigrants, Muslims, whatever it is, grooming gangs, whatever the issue is, didn't happen in a vacuum. Yeah, we had Blair take us to Afghanistan and Iraq. We had 14 years of Tories, austerity policies, one after the other, broken promises, the cutting of police services, the cutting of youth clubs, the Boris wave, Brexit. This stuff didn't happen in a vacuum. And the reason why your passion is being channeled towards the wrong people is because they don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to be held accountable. It is the oldest trick in the playbook that ruling elites have done for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that to move and shift away blame from their bad decision making and their criminal negligence is to then direct that anger towards the most marginalized people in societies. So when we talk about free speech, yes, we accept that there's no absolute free speech. Alhamdulillah, within the Islamic tradition, there's an impressive degree of free speech. But even the European concept of free speech was always about holding the powerful to account. Europe's notion of free speech is actually laudable and praiseworthy. We're not talking about the problematic nature of its manifestation or how it's practiced legally, but just the notion of being able to express yourself freely was centered around holding those in power to account. At the time, it was the Christian Church, the Vatican, and Rome. It was never about dehumanizing and further marginalizing the most marginalized in society. That was never the founding principles or beliefs of Europe's free speech. European free speech was always about holding,
let alone lying and spreading defamation and
mocking and all this type of stuff, right? So what I would say is that, come on then, fellow Brits and patriots, let's exercise this speech then. Hold those who are responsible to account. As for Muslims, we need to remind and continue educating our communities and those outside of our faith communities that, brothers and sisters in Islam and in humanity, it has never been the case that a faith community alone has been the single cause of all a nation's or civilization's problems. There's simply no historical contemporary premise for this. But let's talk about who is benefiting from this, who's making the fulus, who's making the money, who is gaining from this, who's the net benefactor from this, and there you will find the answers to your questions. And we need to encourage this type of critical thinking. And this is without being partisan, because this has been one of the challenges that I've had. How can I convey what I'm conveying without coming across as a Labour or Starmer defender? I'm not, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of what Keir Starmer is being blasted for in terms of immigration was actually the doings of Boris Johnson and his predecessors, right? It was they who opened up the gates, and actually the crime rates in London, comparatively to other parts of the country, is actually low. And immigration is actually much lower than it was with the previous Conservatives. How many spousal applications are being rejected? Indefinite remain to leave. A lot of these applications are now being rejected. But obviously you wouldn't know that based on what's being fed to you through Elon Musk and X and GB News. So to conclude, my brothers and sisters, institutions, jama'as, organizations, mashayikh, imams, du'at, activists, students, pupils, everyone. We have a duty to individually and collectively reach out to those who are being told that we are the enemies. And that's not going to be addressed by giving us samosa and pakode and wiping the streets. That's not good. I'm sorry, it's not going to resolve that. It's not going to resolve that. I even said this to, I think it was Sheikh Asrar or someone. I said it to. I said, look, whilst I appreciate that, Birmingham has a refuse collection problem at the moment, because they're on strike. And whilst I appreciate that you're going out there and cleaning the streets, there's a whole debate around whether, if we do this, then we're taking responsibility away from the state. We pay taxes for our streets to be cleaned. If we now start doing that, that takes away. It's similar to during COVID. Why are we raising money for the NHS when the state is supposed to be funding for the NHS? It's not making sense to me. We're giving round of applause for this person who's raised 2 million, this person who's raised 100,000. What's our taxes going towards? Do you understand? So, my brothers and sisters, there needs to be a bit more of a creative outreach to our non-Muslim friends.
I'll add to that as well that we need to think or get our entrepreneurs and our business people as well to offer an alternative, and our economists to offer an alternative story, an alternative narrative, an alternative a way to save Britain from its economic issues, because things are just going to get worse and worse.
100%.
And, we need to, as a community as well, think and take a lead on sharing the deen, sharing some sharia with people, those parts that are as just as much were sent for them as they were sent for Muslims.
The Prophet he was sent as a message to humanity. He wasn't just sent for South Asia or global South. He was sent for the whole of humanity, right? And therefore we have a duty to share that, and it to be shared with hikmah and wisdom in the context that we're in. And what I mean by that, brothers and sisters, is just use a bit of creative thinking. Yes, convey the message of Islam, but do so understanding the climate. Just don't go straight in with go rap when my guy's kicking off about immigrants. Yeah. We could speak about God, oneness, revelation, and prophethood in a bit, but let's address this issue here that's making him hate Muslims and non-whites. Let's address these issues first. And I actually saw a brother who I have, a Muslim brother, who I don't agree with on much in terms of priorities for Muslims in Britain and the West. He made a very good point, which I did agree with, is that those Muslim entrepreneurs and businessmen with deep pockets, mashallah, tabarakallah, how many of your services are just tailored for Muslims? You'll find that many are just tailored for Muslims. So my dear brothers and sisters, those of you who are entrepreneurs, who are businessmen, who have deep pockets, start thinking about how do we give back to our qawm, wider society. How can they benefit from the things that you've created for your community? And maybe then
there's a group called Patriotic Millionaires, and they're actually pushing for something called a wealth tax.
Muslims?
And it's no, non-Muslims. Okay. And it resembles basically zakat. Right? And I'm thinking, like, I feel sad. We laugh. I feel sad that we've been here so long. We haven't championed an alternative story or a narrative based on the deen, based on the sharia. That's all of it is maslaha. All of it is benefit for human beings, right? The more elements you have with the sharia, generally the more benefit you'll have in your life, right? And these people are trying to curb the flow of people, some people just leeching and mass transferring wealth from working class people to themselves. The sharia has a mechanism. The sharia has built in warnings about this, right? Allah says in the Quran, كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ. So there's certain rulings in place that stop a few rich people hoarding loads of wealth, right? For example, Allah mentions in the Quran, and obviously zakat, for example. I mean, if you just implemented, so they're saying take 2% of wealth on on people who have more than X amount of net worth, net assets, right? So remove not your living mouth, hand to mouth. Like if you think about it, income tax is very unjust, because the poorer pay a vastly higher amount of their percentage of their actual wealth, right? And it's taken before they can feed themselves and so forth. But a tax on actual wealth, like the Sharia calls for, right? Not in terms of tax, but like the zakat is, for example, it's far more just, and it balances, and it ends up helping any local economy, because you're taking that money and it's gonna, instead of sitting in the Cayman Islands somewhere,
it's dynamic wealth. It's dynamic wealth. It's dynamic wealth which stimulates the community, and it's the circulation of wealth from which other wealth can be made. And there's also an eligibility threshold which makes many exempt, and others who are not even paying anywhere near 2.5 that they now have to cough up. Even
imagine Elon Musk pays 2.5% of his
every year.
Elon Musk became Muslim,
yeah,
right? So there is an element that Islam is a genuine threat to some people.
Of course, it is.
People that are the super rich that want to foment, civil war. The people that profit on from lies spreading and so forth. But the average Joe, Islam is probably the thing that will save them in this life and the next.
Look, what is the Sharia? It is ultimately to do with, for simpleton terms, is to do with human problems, and it has answers. It has divine solutions for human problems. And if you were to just take off the lens in which you've been seeing Islam, there will be much appreciation and acknowledgement of how it addresses many of the things which people are suffering from, and the genuine human misery that people are suffering from their day-to-day lives, that it addresses these issues. It's just that words like Sharia and these things have become bastardized, haven't they? And they've become such criminal buzzwords, that people have a notion. It's like, for example, again, like I refer back to the podcast I recently did with Peter McCormack. I do advise those to watch it. I said, what do you think happens in Sharia councils, Peter? Because you think we're amputating and we're whipping and like people are getting stoned and stuff. And he didn't know. I goes, what do you think is happening in these Sharia councils? I goes, in 90% of the cases, mediation. It's dealing with arbitrating between, you know, people who are having problems. I goes, if you were to truly understand what the Sharia is and what it offers mankind, right? And even if you were to pragmatically pick and choose aspects of it, even if, and like I'm a non-Muslim, I'm not going to subscribe to the whole thing, but I'll take those things which I think will be a benefit to society. You'll see such transformative change in society, right? We wouldn't be having these conversations, these problems. And to wrap up, all I ask, brothers and sisters who are Muslim, you have a duty, you have an obligation to go out and engage and not hide. Obviously, have your wits about you. Remain vigilant at all times. I also advise sisters to avoid traveling during this climate after Maghrib alone. Please do not travel alone unless you really have to. I appreciate that people have their own. Salman, this is very important as well because I wrote it down because given the climate, we do need to be given this kind of safety advice. Sisters, please be vigilant. There's this alarm thing. It's like a rape alarm or something which you can have. It's the only thing that you can actually legally possess. Please buy one of them. You can buy them from Amazon for £5 to £7. When I mean to go out and engage and have outreach programs and efforts, I mean to do so within a safe environment. Yeah, you don't need to go out on road at 9 p.m. at night to look for white people to go give the dawah to. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about have your wits about you, remain vigilant, avoid traveling on your own, film everything, document everything, but at the same time engage and do not become insular. This is just because if we had that mindset, Islam would not have reached our motherlands, our ethnic motherlands, right? If we had that mindset. And with regards to non-Muslims, if anyone watches this,
I was going to ask you actually, what's your message, your final message, short message to the real deal patriots, not the plastic patriots, kind of shilling for Israel, but the real average Joe, the non-Muslim? What's your message to them?
Follow the money. Follow the money. Who benefits from the stuff?
All the way to the bank.
All the way to the bank. All the way to the corridors of power and beyond. Who's funding Tommy Robinson? How come he gets to travel to Marbella and Panama and Colombia and wears designer clothes in the tens of thousands whilst you're struggling to have 2 meals a day? Who's funding from the unrest that we're seeing? Who benefits from the levels of migration that we're seeing? What is it about these countries where people are coming from? What do they all have in common? My dear brothers and sisters in humanity and fellow patriots, just ask questions. Just ask questions. Who's benefiting from this? I'm not. You can't be benefiting from it. I know you're not. That's why you're attending protests. And that's why you're marching and raising flags. Because you're not benefiting from it. You're at a loss. You're feeling the pinch, more than the pinch. But who's benefiting from it? Follow the money. Ask the right questions. And I leave it on that.
Thank you. Jazakumullah khairan, Dilly Hussain, Deputy Editor of 5 Pillars. And Jazakumullah khairan to you, brothers and sisters at home, for watching. If you like this podcast, as usual, give a like and a share and let us know in your comments below. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.